Hello, and welcome in this first podcast about the summary of the course of An Introduction to English Grammar. Let's start off with the first chapter, the grammatical rank scale. The rank scale is a hierarchy comprising units of varying extent, each fitting inside the other in a kind of Chinese box arrangement. Morpheme, which is included in word, which itself is included in phrase, then in clause, and finally in sentence. First of all, a morpheme is the smallest grammatically significant unit. Secondly, the word is the smallest independent unit of grammar. Traditionally, 9 word classes are distinguished: noun, verb, pronoun, adjective, adverb, preposition, conjunction, article, and interjection. However, this classification is neither exhaustive nor based on systematic methodological principles. Note that some words have to be classified under more than one word class. Thirdly, the phrase is a combination of words, minimally one word, displaying specific structural relations. Its type is determined by the word class of its head. Fourthly, the clause is the unit of grammatical structure which has a verb as its conceptual head. Its type may be defined by its speech function, see chapter 2, and in the dimension of transitivity. Transitivity. There are 5 main clause types cut across by 3 main verb types. The intransitive verbs, followed by no obligatory element. Intransitive clause, subject plus verb. Then there is the transitive verbs, followed by object. Monotransitive clause, subject plus verb plus direct object. Detransitive clause, subject plus verb plus indirect object plus direct object. And finally, complex transitive clause, subject plus verb plus direct object plus complement object or adverb object. And finally, after intransitive and transitive, there are the copular linking verbs, followed by subject complement or an adverbial. Copular clause, subject plus verb plus complement subject or adverb subject. Note that each basic clause type can occur with any number of optional adverbials. Also note that detransitive clauses involve a third party which benefits from the action or receives something as a result. And fifthly and finally, sentences are either simple, one clause, or complex, more than one clause. In a complex sentence, clauses stand to each other in part-part or part-whole relation. First, part-part, where there is coordination, linking of clauses of equal status. Both elements are free, in the sense that each could stand on its own. Subordination, binding of elements of unequal status. The dominant element is free, but the dependent is not. And after part-part, part-whole, one clause is down-ranked. It functions as a constituent of a rank lower than the sentence, that is, of a clause, a phrase. And that was the end of chapter 1. Let's go to chapter 2, basic clause types. There are 4 basic clause types: declaratives, convey information, statements; interrogatives, ask questions; imperatives, instruct somebody to do something; and exclamatives, express the speaker's own feelings or wishes. Note that the intonation is also important and part of the grammar. First, let's shortly cover declaratives. the speaker gives information to the hearer. That information also includes the speaker's modal, epistemic or deontic, position towards the propositional content. Declaratives have subject-finite order, except if negative phrases occur in pre-subject position. Then, after declaratives, let's talk about interrogatives. The speaker is a partial non-knower and transfers the role of knower to the hearer, ignoring some incongruent form-meaning mappings, like declarative interrogatives or rhetorical questions. Interrogatives can be divided into two major classes. First class, yes-no or polar interrogatives. The speaker asks the hearer if a specific state of affairs has occurred or is likely to occur. 3 subpoints. First, in open-ended interrogatives. That is, no modal element equals to no modal element. Non-affirmative forms of determiners and adverbs, any, ever, yet, are used. Then, neutral orientation. Second subpoint. In interrogatives with affirmative forms of determiners or adverbs, some already, the expected answer is yes. Then, positive orientation. And finally, last subpoint, in interrogatives containing negative forms of one kind or another, the expected answer is no. Then, negative orientation. Warning: negative orientation may be complicated by the combination of a positive and negative attitude. The new negative assumption replaces the old positive one, or by the combination of a verb with negative polarity and affirmative items, which leads to a more emphatically positive orientation. Then, after the yes-no or polar interrogatives, there are the WH interrogatives. WH interrogatives are formed with an interrogative or WH element. First, the WH element comes first in the sentence. Second, the WH word itself takes first position in the W element, exception made when the WH word is a prepositional complement in formal English. And third and lastly, there is subject-finite inversion in all cases, except that in which the WH element is subject. After interrogatives, imperatives. The speaker asks the hearer to realize an action the speaker wants. However, sometimes imperatives are used to make an offer to the hearer, that is, to suggest an action they might want. Most commonly, imperatives do not have an explicit subject. Imperatives with subject, second or third, may sometimes be used to single out two or more distinct addresses. Note that the implied subject with subjectless imperatives is second person. First and third person imperatives can be formed by preposing the verb let, followed by a subject in the accusative case. Imperative clauses may be coordinated with another clause, with the conjunction and to produce a conditional meaning. And after imperatives, let's briefly talk about exclamatives. Exclamatives have an exclamatory WH element, what, functioning as a predeterminer in a NP, and how, functioning as intensifier. Interrogative exclamatives map interrogative syntax onto exclamatory function. They invite the listener's agreement to show something on which the speaker has strong feelings. The orientation is thus vigorously positive. And finally, after exclamatives, tag questions. With declarative host clauses, the speech function of tag questions most commonly is a blend of statement and question. They give information and state a specific proposition, but expect a response. In some cases, tag questions function as statements. The speaker gives information in the dialogue in an assertive way and does not expect a response. When attached to an imperative host clause, a tag question inherently expects the response of the hearer, complying with the action. But verbal response is not really necessary. And that was the end of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The noun phrase. A broad distinction can be made between the head of the noun phrase, which indicate a general type of thing, categorizing function, and the rest of the noun phrase, in which the general type of thing is narrowed down to the instance talked about. Instantiation. First point, the head noun. First subpoint, proper name versus common noun. A proper name or proper noun designates a unique individual, either person or thing, that is, an instance. There are two productive mechanisms which allow proper nouns to be used as common nouns. First, when the proper noun comes to designate a type, such as person with name X or person with characteristics of X. Second, when a person's proper name designates something created by that person. A common noun designates a type. If preceded by a determiner, the NP with common noun comes to refer to a specific instance of the type. Common nouns can be further subcategorized into count versus uncount nouns, singular versus plural nouns, if count, and collective nouns. Next subpoint, count versus uncount nouns. Count nouns have singular plural contrasts. They need a determiner in the singular. They can be modified by numbers and with plural count noun objects. The final verb is in the plural. Note: with names of animals, birds, plants, etc., the singular form can be used with a plural meaning when the plural type is designated, rather than specific instances. Uncount nouns have no plural form. They do not need a determiner. They cannot be modified by numbers, and, if they are the subject of the clause, the finite verb is always in the singular. Uncount nouns can be quantified or counted by quantifiers, some, little, much, etc., by expressions of measure, such as 2 tons of, a gallon of, or by nouns expressing quantity, such as a loaf of bread, a stroke of luck. One and the same noun may sometimes function as an uncount noun, and in other contexts as a count noun, like for drink of food substances and servings, varieties, kinds, animals and food, abstract nouns and instances, abstract nouns and results, etc. Indefinite quantifiers and uncount nouns. Indefinite quantifiers, that is, some several, provide quantitative information about the head noun they modify. With count noun, a few, many, a number of, more, a lot of, etc. With uncount nouns, a little, less, much, an amount of, more, a lot of, a bit of, etc. After count and uncount nouns, singular and plural nouns. Singular nouns are always or typically used in the singular. They behave like the singular form of a count noun, the sun, the pope, a chat, etc. Plural nouns have only plural form. They refer to things which are thought of as plural by English speakers: jeans, the premises, belongings, scissors, appearances, etc. After singular and plural nouns, collective nouns. Collective nouns, also called group nouns, refer to a collective, a group of people or things. They are used as singular when the group is foregrounded as a single unit. They are used as plural when the focus is on the individuals within the group. And after collective nouns, adjectives used as head nouns. First of all, adjectives referring to a number of people sharing the same characteristic or quality behave like plural nouns. Secondly, adjectives referring to things having a particular quality behave like singular nouns. And thirdly, colour adjectives can be used as head nouns and behave like count nouns. And finally, after adjectives used as head nouns, pronouns as head. The referent of a pronoun is typically definite and concrete. It need not be singular, and the pronouns one, you, we, and they can have a quote-unquote generalized meaning in referring to people in general, rather than to specific reference. They designates the persons or animals or things mentioned or indicated and considered as male, female, or neutral. Note the use of gender-neutral they, their, themselves, and themselves. And that's the end of that point about the head noun. Let's continue with the point about subject finite concord. The most important type of concord in English is grammatical concord, that is the concord of number between subject and finite. Difficulties may arise through the conflict between the principle of grammatical concord and two other principles, that of notional concord, agreement according to the notion or the idea on number, rather than the form of the NP, and that of proximity, agreement of the finite with whatever noun or pronoun closely preceding it. Firstly, collective nouns. In British English, collective nouns are often a choice between grammatical and notional concord, depending on whether the group is being considered as a single undivided body or as a collection of individuals. Second, coordinated subject. When a subject consists of NPs, coordinated by end, a distinction has to be made between appositional, when the NPs refer to the same thing, singular finite, and non-appositional coordination, when the NPs refer to more than one entity, plural finite. Some coordinated NPs may receive both interpretations. N3, with indefinite expressions of amount of the form NP1 of NP2, notional concord as priority over grammatical concord. And after the point about subject finite concord, determiners. The determiner slot is concerned with identification. Identifiers signal whether the speaker assumes the listener can or cannot identify the entities referred to. In the latter case, we have an indefinite identifier, and in the former case, we have a definite identifier. First subpoint, indefinite identifiers. Indefinite identifiers signal that the speaker does not assume the listener can identify the specific entity referred to. First, the indefinite article. Form. The indefinite article is a or an, when the head of a NP is a singular count noun. After form use, introduction of one complement of a copular verb, arbitrary generic use. And after the indefinite article, the zero article. It is found with plural count and uncount nouns in indefinite NPs. NPs with the zero article refer to an instance of the class designated by the noun, when the speaker does not assume that the listener can identify the specific instance. Next subpoint: definite identifiers. First, the definite article. Form: the definite article, the, can be used before a single noun, a plural count noun, or an uncount noun. Meaning: the speaker is referring to a specific instance of the class referred to by the noun, and does assume the listener can identify this specific instance. Special uses: generic use, that is reference to the class as a whole. The as part of a name, of a country, of seas and oceans, of institutions, etc. The in fixed expressions with comparatives. The more, the merrier, etc. After the definite article, demonstratives. They identify a reference in terms of spatial and temporal proximity. This, these, close to the speaker, that, those, not close to the speaker. And finally, possessives. They identify a reference in terms of possession. And then, last point of this chapter, let's very briefly talk about the post-head zone. The post-head or post-modifier zone in the noun phrase includes any material following the head noun that is still part of the noun phrase. This zone is not associated with a single function or a single type of post-modifier. And this is the end of that first podcast about a summary of the course of an introduction to English grammar. I'll see you in the next one.